Okay, so we've got this fabulous picture here of some pebbles, and obviously there's lots of other ones to choose from as well. What I would say is don't put too much pressure on yourself to finish the whole thing this evening. If you do, that's fine, and if you don't, that's fine as well, just because there's quite a lot of content to this lesson in a really nice way, and you'll really enjoy it. So it's very relaxing, but there's quite a lot to think about. So what I would say 4 things to get out from this evening, and even if you only do a small section, then that's absolutely fine, because it's the practice part of it and actually having a go with all of these 4 skills in there. So one of the things we're going to do is look at using like reverse shadow to get the shape of our stones. So we'll be concentrating on these shadows between to help us create the shape of our stones and pebbles. That's one thing. Another thing is really looking at how we can use shadow on the stone and the different tones of the stones, those tones of colour and shadow to create a more 3D effect. The third one is the texture of the stones as well, because they're all different, and looking at how to create that with brush strokes. And then the fourth one is how we get this wet look with these stones. And what I will say in advance is it's not a quick fix. So you might do one of the stones and think, I can't really tell. And that is because we need several of the stones with the light bit on it to actually, for it to impact as a group, because it's part of this is our brain actually noticing that there's a pattern with and the shine. So it's one of those things that will emerge, but it's not an instant one tonight. But it's very enjoyable. So just to hope you have a great time with it, really. So I'm going in with a grid today. Because there's quite a lot going on, I'm just going to obviously just use a pen down the middle of it so you can see. Because there's a lot going on in this photograph, in this picture, it's a little bit easier to just scale, section it out and then scale it up. Now you can pop it on your board if you want to as well, or your paper, but you do it lightly. Same as always, I'm going in darker, so this will probably come through some of my paint, but that's fine because it's just a demo so you can see what to do. But if you're putting any of these lines and things on that grid, you'll want to do them really lightly underneath the acrylic so it doesn't get muddy when we start to put the layers on. But it is quite handy for something like this when there's an awful lot going on. It does really help. So I'm going to do a general sketching out, and I'm going to go in for these very big pebbles to start with. They're absolutely gorgeous, all the jewel-like colours and things like that. So, and obviously we can use each quarter to work out how much space each one takes up. So, and when I say approximate, it is an approximate amount. So that one nearly comes to the top. So it's just kind of working out how far up they come. The reason it's an approximate is that we can change these as we go with our shadow when we put the shadow in, which will happen probably. So don't worry too much if they're not absolutely accurate. So this comes right over here. Comes over quite a long way, doesn't it, that one? So I need to make this wider. So scaling it up can be a little bit difficult sometimes. But just going in with those biggest stones first. I'm going to go in with that one. I'm going to go in with this one here and this big one down here. So this one's quite helpful to do because it just comes right down below the middle. Or it depends where you've drawn your grid on your paper, to be fair. And it comes just over halfway there. So we're just using kind of the area to help us with these stones. And I personally think it's a much easier way of doing it rather than kind of second guessing it. It's nice to draw it without as well sometimes, but when you're trying to place, specific items, it's quite good. Okay, So, and again, as I've said, we don't need, nobody else knows how exact, you know, the exact size of your pebble. So it doesn't really matter. It's just to focus on those 4 things really, to have a go and practice with them. It's not something we do a lot. Even with these colours, these aren't colours that we see a lot of unless we're doing something with stone in it or natural pebbles. So I'm going to pop this one in. Now I've got that one in, I can kind of pop that one underneath it. So this one here. Looks, it comes out here and then around just back down here. Some of it goes underneath, doesn't it, as well? Underneath like that. And as I said, we can change it, but I think once you've got some key sizes in as well, then you can look around to do the rest in that section. That's why I like this method. So I'm going to finish this section, but you could go on and do the ones in the other section if you want, you know, working out what comes next to it, etc. So I'm going to come in and do this one here that overlaps. This one kind of comes in, this gap between there. That one comes down, that comes over. We're just kind of looking, aren't we? It's a good one for just kind of working out. Everything's going in. And then I'm going to pop this one in because we've just put this one in at the side. I'm just looking, being mindful of how far out this one comes. Coming down the bottom here. And then you can start to see, oh yes, there's another one that comes up here and it comes all the way around there. You know, so we're just using one to help us with the next one, really. And the other thing is, of course, you don't have to put every single stone in if you don't want as well. Like somebody, it was annoying a member of art class today, like the fact that that's broken, because sometimes you like a nice finish one. You know, you can make that into a nice smooth stone if you don't want like a broken one, or you don't, you know, you miss one out. It's absolutely fine. So I'm just going to continue because I've got all this section here. I can work out now what kind of goes in the middle. Now you'll see there are kinds of stones underneath some of these. But even though it's very dark, you might start to see, oh yeah, now I can see there's a little one down there, etc. And we can you know, tackle those stones that are down below first anyway, which is what we're going to do tonight. Work in reversal. And then this stone here comes out this side, interestingly. It comes down there. Yeah, so I'm kind of working my way out, but again, you can just go over to one section, one side. There isn't really a way of doing it. It's just whichever way feels best. What I am going to do though is I'm just kind of give us pop on this edge so that we can see that this stone's got an edge there, like that. That needs to come up a little bit more. And we can use the end of our, you know, the edge of our brush and everything to do this. So I'm just going to continue with this little corner now because I've got most of these things in. This one comes down almost near that one. That might be a bit need to be a bit bigger actually, this one. I'll just make that a bit bigger. That one comes around here. Yeah, that one's almost touching it, so I need to bring this out a bit. And then we've got this bottom one here that comes up. It's an interesting shape there, but they're fascinating. They really are once you start kind of looking at all of them. So I'm kind of just popping a little bit of an edge on here on this one, just so I can see where the 3D effect is. Just to might help me later remember I'm putting that in. And then obviously there's something behind there, but we can't quite see what it is. Looks like another stone underneath, another pebble underneath. So I've done this one in this section. There's a kind of a reddish one there. And then there's another one between here. That's quite nice to see. And then, you know, we can go from there. I think actually I've got quite a long thin board, which is probably why I need to cut it off a little bit earlier here. I'm just going to just get some tape. I've noticed I'm having to lengthen some of these stones at the edge because this board is so long and I've taped off the top. So I'm just going to tape off a bit there so that it's more in line with the picture. And the same here, just this outside edge. There we go, that makes a bit more sense now. Okay. But yeah, it's fun. It's like kind of just fitting all the shapes in. A bit like Tetris, isn't it? But with a pencil. So, got a nice stone coming here, a nice pebble coming down this side here. That's touching there. Might come out a little bit further, but as I said, this is not like the end result. We can fix and move and do all sorts of this and that one in there. And then you start to see the ones underneath as well, don't you? So I know I'm seeing this one here and the top bit there comes down. But then obviously there's another one that comes in there. So I'll do that in a minute. I'm just kind of working on filling the spaces that I've got most in to start with, and then I'll work on that side. So, and then we've got one in the middle, which is comes down a bit and then comes back along the side of this one and underneath this pebble. And then we've got a nice one here side, which is coming down. Now we're sketching it in, but what we're going to do when we actually do the start putting in the reverse, the shadow, that will really give us the exact shape. It's much easier. We're just getting in a general shape for now. And then obviously we've got this one between it. So we're just lining up everything so it fits. Bring that right down here. That touches the bottom of that one. They're really interesting, aren't they? The shapes of them. Fascinating. There we go, and we've got a bit of a gap there, but we'll make that gap more accurate once we pop it on. So then I'm just going to make my way over here now and get these last bits in over this bottom corner. So you see how it all slots together, and it's so much easier once we have a few things in place. It makes it an awful lot easier. And then we've got this kind of big round end here. And then this round one here. Oh, it's got a bit of a point up here, I suppose. But again, doesn't matter until when we start getting those shadows in, that will help us a lot. There we go. And then we've just got one section then, so it just makes it so much easier. We've done all of that. I think we'd have been here a bit longer had we had to not think without the grid actually. So I'm going to go in with this one, which takes up quite a proportion here, and it comes just over the line there. That's helpful in the seam. And it comes around. We can see how far it comes down on this particular pebble here. And then down again, it's kind of cut off a little bit by the end of this purple one. So then we've got a bit of a gap there. We've got this blue one. Just kind of a bit of a gap there as well. Blue one goes round. But as I said, don't worry, it's not totally accurate, because what we'll do is once we start getting the shadows in, it'll start to pop out and make a lot more sense, and we can kind of move things along. So before I go up there with that, I'm going to get this red one in. Side, because I can see that starts just above halfway. Bring that all the way around. And then we've got this blue one here. And going into the background there. And then we've got this purple one that kind of comes over the top here on an angle. And you can even check your angle with that one, that purple one, by just popping your pencil there. Just make sure it's about going about in the right direction. Oops, I've gone too far with that, haven't I? In fact, I've put it in totally the wrong place, actually. Don't follow me on that one. It should be over here. It's the right angle, but the wrong place. So, there we go. So that one, I think, needs to come up a little bit. This one kind of just overlaps on this stone. And it goes, you know, it's got a bit of a heel to it, that one, hasn't it? So again, we can just kind of have a general look at the angle. And then we've got this edge here slightly. And then what else have we got in here? So we want to bring that stone now between this lovely grey one, grey bluey. And then we've got another pebble coming right through here, almost in the corner. Again, you know, you can check your angle, make sure it's coming in the right general direction. That overlaps on there. And there we are. So we're just kind of going round. And then there's only a few more to pop in. So most of these are actually underneath, aren't they? So we can now see what's going underneath. So that's underneath. There's just a kind of a side of it. There we can see. And then that goes back into nothing, into total shadow down there. And then I'll just lift the top off there. I can't really see what that is underneath now. Oh, it's just one. I thought it was two. So that's one that comes around here. All the way around there. That's it. And then we've just got something almost, haven't we? This one needs to go up a bit. It's not too small. Keep doing that one small, and it should be. There's almost like a little one there in between these two going. Yeah, so we get in there, and then there's what's that? That part of another one. So we actually can't see what some of these are. What's that? I'm just looking at the shadow between here, the edge of this. There's almost like a little stone there, and then something. Yeah, something maybe that splits between them there. So it's yeah, so there's a lot going on in there, but actually what we can do once we start to pop in the shadow, it makes it so much easier. So you can actually use a you know, obviously the shadows here are very important. So the contrast between these pebbles makes us understand it's pebbles on a beach when we see how dark these are, these shadowy areas. So what you want to do is obviously get something you could use. You can use black if you want to in these. I mean, some areas that have got slight little pebbles between, but we can sort that after. So what we're going to do is go in with the reverse now. We're going to go in with that shadow and really start to kind of create that. So I'm just putting a bit of brown, but if you've got Payne's grey, you could add purple. If you haven't got, or black, if you haven't got black, I haven't here. I've got brown and purple here. or you could use a bit of blue and brown, just really until you get the depth, you know, the depth of mix that you want. So this is just purely for working on the shadows, really. So I'm just going to bring my, I've got my tester paper, which is so important. Purple, blue, brown, and I'm just going to go in and just decide, just with a round brush, which one is going to give me the desired depth of colour. Let's see, let's try a bit of purple in there. So again, experimenting with the shadow colours is a good idea. Try a bit of blue in there as well, actually. Sometimes the blue really works. Gives it a very, very, yeah, there we go. Let's see that. Yeah, I'm going to go in with the blue because it's looking much darker. So mix plenty up, because I think you can actually get away with making these shadow areas not very thin, because they are a kind of a shade in their own right. So I'm actually going to go in and pop that on quite thickly. The only thing to watch is if it's starting to dry because it's hot in the room that you're in, because I know we're in really hot conditions at the minute. Just add a little bit of water to your brush. So all I'm going to do now is just start with any areas that I can see that are really dark, and I'm going to follow the pattern that I can see. So I'm going to go in here, although I can see something else poking up, it's still very dark. So I'm going to go in with this, load up the tip of my brush so it's nice, and I'm getting to those little crevices, and I'm just really, this is where I now start to look at the shape of the shadow between the stone. That'll create the stone shape for me, because it's so much easier to do it that way. It really is. So we've got our initial, you know, setting them out where they're going, but now I'm following round the shape, the shape that we've got of these pebbles from these shadow areas. So I'm going to just fill in these shadows, and it will all start to emerge. Now I'm going to get the darkest ones in first that I can see between, but then what I'm going to make sure I do is look at the very small shadows in terms of, there we go. So that, can you see, it's already creating a much neater version of the stone edge. And you can go down as small as you want with your brushes. I'm just going to get myself another small one, actually, because I haven't got one. Just grab another one while I'm here. Go for that one. There we go. So what I'm actually going to do, because I'm also observing while I'm looking at how far up this shadow comes. It's kind of like, actually, there is a bit of a line, but it's not quite as dark. So I'm just going to make a slightly lighter one with a bit of brown. And I'm just going to go in, because I can see a very, very thin line between it, and just go in and make that thin line shape, because it's still there. I can still see it between. So I'm starting to create the shape around as well now. And then just keep going with any of those little spaces that you can see. So like the one up here, I'm really being mindful just to look at the shape I'm creating around those. There's one this side. I'm just going to split. If your brush gets too loaded up, just take some off and then just get it back on the tip. So I'm looking over here now. I can see a shadow going underneath here. Quite a thickish one. But then I can also see a very small one going between on the tip. So you can see quite quickly how we are starting to see those shadows. Now again, there's some slightly lighter colours in there, but I'm going in with the darkest first. We can lighten that up. I'm continuing that line between there again. I can see it's just thin, so right on the tip. I'll come out the other side. And then I'll fill in the rest of the shadow shape around there. Like that. There we go. And then I'm continuing to just look at where the shadow goes in. Now, as I said, there is some lighter colours in there. I'll pop those in after. But I just want to make sure I get that nice shape, you know, between, so that it's starting to then, we can start to see some of the shape of our pebbles. I'm going to continue doing that. There's one over this side here. I want to see what shape this it's making on this rock, on this pebble. It really gets us to look at the detail of the edge of it. Following this round, seeing what shape this makes. You can always turn your board or your paper round as well if it's difficult to get your, you know, to get to where you want. So I'm just going to make sure I've got the edge of this. I feel like I've got that shape, and then again I can see something in the shadows, but I'll pop that in after. I'm just going to go in with these very darkest ones first and put the ones that are underneath next. And again, I'm following this shape of the shadow all the way around where I can see, and to me I can still see a little line between there, so I'm going to go through it just very deep, just carefully. And then again the edge of this. It's really quite enjoyable doing, popping all these shapes in. And then again I can see the shadow here between, so I'm going to make the shape between them. That one's gone over a bit, but again, like I said, it doesn't matter even if you go over with shadow, because you can just lighten it up over the top of that. And then again, you know, wherever you've got something else between it. Now that's not as dark down there, so I'm just going to go kind of the edge where I can see marked out on there. And there. But I can see a little line of shadow around and underneath this stone, and one there's a bit between here, so I'm going to pop that there. That's what I can see. It's less dark, isn't it, on the when it are the top ones? But again, here I'm going to make sure I've got those dark ones there. We just keep, you know, just keep looking at what you can see best you can. And again, there's a little bit of a line there. It's not quite as thick, but just gonna, I can still see a shadow line. I'm going to put it in. As I said, just, you know, if it's very warm in the area that you're working in, just keep dipping a little bit of water in. And I can see a very thick fine line there. And it doesn't matter, you see, if your line isn't really fine, because what you can do is take your paint right up to it and go over it once we go into it. So don't worry if your line ends up being a bit thicker than you want it to, because you can go and we can bring the paint right up to that end as well. You can quickly start to see, can't we, like how it's creating those the shapes of the rocks really nicely for us. I'll continue down here so I can see the edge of this one. Right. Just bear with me a moment. I'm just going to press pause for 1 second and just sort something out. Okay, so we'll just keep going on this along these lines. This is kind of our prep work, really. So I'm just going to say again, there is a bit of a shadow between this red one and the dark one, and you would get that. You'd get like you know, you do get a shadow on there. But I'm just kind of when it's a bit more delicate, I just want to load it on the tip, and then again, you know, we can see just the shadow between it. It might be a thin shadow, but when we start to look, it's like, oh yeah, I can see that. I haven't seen that before. I wouldn't, you know, wouldn't have seen it. So again, there's a nice shadow here between these two. Some corner even there. And then you see the shadow between there. It comes all the way down, actually, doesn't it? That one. You can see it just like all the way, halfway down to there. And then it goes down to a very dark colour anyway. So just going to bring that down where I can see it. Then it's quite dark colour anyway down here. So it probably will disappear. And we keep working our way around and across. So what else have we got? So just, yeah, just keep working your way through that for the moment. That bit's got a little bit in it there, but again, we still need a shadow around it. So I'm going to do that. So I'm just flicking between two brushes here. And again, you see, you know, the shadow down there, there's quite a definite shadow, isn't there? This is kind of the preparation, really, for getting it how we want it when we start doing all the other things, really. You can see it currently there. It's quite gets thicker as it's down here, definitely. And then, you know, we can see this here is quite dark. There's something else in there again, but we'll just get in these darker areas, and then we can lighten up anything as well while we're in there afterwards. So that creates quite a big contrast between that and the edge of that. And it's there, you know, if you look and you think, actually, that's a bit wider than I want it to be. I'm just going to make sure that shadows go in a bit narrower. Then, you know, you can do that as you're going along, just adapt it. Yeah, I'm just popping that in, and I'll sort out the other little shape within once we've got the darkest ones in there. What else have we got? So we have got a bit of a dark shadow down there, look. Very small one there, not much. Something like that. You can make it lighter anyway if you don't want to make it darkish. Can we see one? Yeah, there's kind of a, you can see like there's almost a little bit of in this corner shadow. Not quite as dark as some of the others, but I'll just pop a little bit in just to remind us to go back there. Okay. What else have we got there? So obviously it's very flat at the minute, and we will transform it a little bit to make it less flat. So I've still got this shadow a little bit too wide here. It's almost, that's better. There we go. Okay. Things, you know, things change as you do them. And then, yeah, just keep following around. Where else can you see the shadow? Where does it go? It's not coming out down a bit here. It's not quite as dark, but it's dark enough for me to think about popping it in. There's some other colours in there, so I'm only going to pop that bit in there. You know, these are a bit lighter, but again, I can see a bit of a shadow between them. I'm going to have to add some water because it's getting warm again in here. And just keep going, putting all these little bits. Now, so this is part of this stone, but it is quite dark. So again, I'm going to pop some of that in. It's almost like the edge of the stone anyway, isn't it? So I'm going to pop it in. Even if I change the colour a little bit with it, I'm going to get it in because it does also edge the end of that one because it's the shadow and colour between this stone. What have we got up here? There we go. Now between that one, I can't really see a really dark, so I'm going to make that much lighter. I can't really see a really dark one between that. It's extremely thin if it is. So I'm just going to go in with a bit of purple here. Push that off. So work it off on a bit of kitchen roll. And I'm just going to pop a little bit of this purpley here between there. It's not quite the same depth as everywhere else. Having said that, underneath on this stone, you get much thicker shadow underneath on that one. It's just where it falls, isn't it? And then underneath that side as well, there is a much, you know, darker shadow with more depth in it. So I'm going to pop those in there. And then again, you know, you can see that shadow there. Really interesting when you start looking at shadows like this. It's like, oh gosh, and you know, didn't realise. And then again, you know, where else have you got that you want to pop it on? So I'm going to just do this here between these two. This one's got a very clear shadow, hasn't it? Right under there. I'm going to make this a bit more fluid so I can keep it moving. So that shadow there is, you know, it shows about the depth of these stones really. And then again to the side, it's really deep between those. There's not obviously nothing down there between them. And again, that can give you that nice sweeping shadow, gives you the nice sweeping shape. A little bit, well, not as much on the top, but there's a bit around the side. So it's wherever you start to see it really, and it does take a bit of getting used to seeing these, even the thin ones. More the thin ones. The deep ones are easier to see. This one here has got a nice sweeping one around here. That's a bit lighter there. But you can still see it. And then obviously between here, again, it's quite a deep, you know, deeper shadow here. Gives us the depth of shape of that stone, that pebble, and then this one between here as well. So we're getting the shape of the stone in there. and the kind of the depth of that between it as well, the area between it. So yes, we just keep going, and it is a work, you know, we're working through like a little process, and it gets much easier once we start doing the actual pebbles, because we've kind of got the, you know, all the nuts and bolts of it, as it were, out of the way. And it teaches us to look in a totally different way when we're doing it this way. So again, I'm just continuing to look at the shadows I can see between here. Oops, I over that one by accident. Yeah, another deep bit here in between these. It's all quite dark anyway under that stone, but that's the next bit we'll look at anyway, is, you know, how we get some of these shadows on these stones as well, to give them that 3D effect, so that they're not just flat all in one colour. And also how we do it smoothly. So keep working through this. There's a little bit of a, not much of a shadow, as much of a shadow there. And some areas won't have as much shadow on at all. And we can, you know, we can soften that off as well. It's a good idea to get your shadows in first anyway, so that we're not putting them on last and flattening the whole stones. But it just so happens it helps us to get the shape doing it this way. And then again, there's quite, you know, it's quite dark shadows between these as well, giving us the shape of both of those stones. So I'm going to focus on this one. This one. This one. This edge. And small in between. Trying quite quickly now. There we go. So we've got these things going on here. There's a bit of a gap. There's a bit of a shadow there. Not massive, but a bit. And then we've just got some, you know, just keep working through. See what else we've got. There's one here. So this again, we're just looking at the edge of the stone when we're doing it. Make sure we're following the right kind of shape for it. And again, there's a nice thinner one through there. Look. And again, we can use it to get the top shape. And any of the distance between these two stones as well. Just going to mix some more paint just to make sure I've got enough dark. And then get those nice and, you know, the depth of colour between those. Really pulls you in, it's lovely. Okay, I've just got a little bit round here. And I'm going to take a pause and come and chat to everybody and just get these ones in. There's a lot to pop in. That's a bit darker on there. Down between, there's more down between now. Depth of my brush has been a bit funny actually. The only thing it can happen when it's warm is that just really kind of get to the bottom of your bristles, because it can clump up and dry, and then you get this, it just starts to splay out a little bit. So just pull it together a bit. Make sure you've got all of that out. And then again, it creates this kind of edge of this pebble here. And then we've just got that top area. Right, the top end. You know, there's a little bit of a more of a shadow at that side there. And then we've got, you know, you can see where this will come back to already. And we'll notice more as we go, but it's a great way of getting some very very accurate lines and things in, actually very accurate shapes of the stone. So I'm just going to take, oh, actually I'll see one there. I'm just going to pop that one in. Notice that I'm just down here. That's casting quite a shadow on the back of that stone there. Pop that one in. That's a bit softer. Yeah, so I mean, we start seeing things we've never seen before when we do it this way. So I'm just going to take a pause, and you know, let you have a go, and I'll come back in a minute. Okay, so we've got to a point now where we've got lots of shadow in, and there's obviously other bits we'll want to do as well. However, what I would suggest that, you know, we start to do now is like have a little look. You can look in between the shadows to see if there's anything you want to do, and we kind of, what we'll be looking at is layering up. So what I would always think is probably a good idea to do is look at those stones that are underneath the top ones and do those ones first, so that when you put your top stones on, doesn't matter if you go over it a little bit because it's already undone, rather than trying to, you know, faff around a little bit. So I'm kind of going in even between these cracks when I see a few other little bluey colours and things like that. I'm going to start to pop those in now as well, the ones that are underneath here. So what we want, and this is because some of these pebbles are smooth and some of them are textured, as we start to build that texture up for the more textured ones, then we can do that nearer the top end when we've got our base coat on. But for example, some of these rounded stones in here, like these pebbles in here, we've just got to be careful we don't create a really hard edge. So my suggestion for the smooth stones particularly is, and some of the other ones to some extent, is when we mix our mid colour, we'll mix a mid colour for each one, but then we'll also mix a shadow colour. And I've been leaning towards putting in like a slight blue tone into the main mix, and that actually sometimes gives the edge enough of a dark colour. And because obviously it's not going to be as dark as our shadows, but it's going to create a sense of the, you know, the where you get that shadow going downwards, you know, where they get the edge of the curve, but without actually putting a hard edge on it. So I'll show you what I mean. But basically what we're thinking about doing is mixing the colours up at the same time and actually adding them a little bit whilst they're still damp for these smoother stones, so that we can blend them a little bit. So it'll become more clear, I think, on the top ones. The little ones here are a bit less obvious, certainly that flat one, because there's not much going on with it. But what it does is it helps to create that sense of 3D, really, of a stone bee 3D, without making it really hard edge and looking false. So for example, let's have a little look. Just going to flip it. I've just got my little palette here to cover up my painting. for example, so I'm going to, and all we're doing, this is what I'm at a point as well. I've definitely used white in here now with these colours, because and this is what I was saying, it's more unusual than, say, the flowers in nature, which we can use pure colours for. We probably use more of a tint with some of these because they're really pastely. So when you to knock that really fresh bright colour down, we'll pop some tint in with it, some white in with it, and it'll make all the difference to kind of making these obviously more like stones than, you know, because stones are although they've got nice colours, they're more pastel, the effect of them. So and that's what we're going for with it. When we add white to most things, it makes it pastel, it takes away the vibrancy of it. So just really like looking at all these bits between the gaps first, thinking what have we got in here. So some of these is kind of almost a bit of a bluey colour, so I'm just going to take a little bit of my blue that I've got there, and I'm still taking a little bit of my brown as well, because it's still very dark in between there. And I'm just going to take the tiniest bit of white tint and just see if that gives it enough of just a lift, so that when I go into this little bit in the middle here, I'll show you on there, here, that we can almost get a sense that, there we go, yeah, the sense that there's the edge of a stone in here without making it pop to the top. Because if we go in with brights and whites, so the understones, then that will they'll come to the top, because obviously the blues in this will recede still, so we still know they're in the shadow. So if you've got, like, there is a little bit of white in there, or a lighter colour, just a small bit, I'll just mix it again in a bit in with this, again, and just pick out just the very small areas. But because we've still mixed it with blue, it's still going to recede as opposed to pop up, which is what we're going to do with the top layers to make them go. Then obviously we've got something going on here. I'm going to use a bit of brown and a bit of white for that. What's going on there? So I know there's something going on here, but it's still quite dull. And I might mix that in between some of my other colours anyway. So we can actually get away with some of these with minimal colours as well. And just add a couple of those slightly lighter ones in there. And just check they're not too bright. So I'm just going to blend that in. And this is what I was saying about, you know, doing it all whilst it's wet, because it will really help to, you know, make things not quite so vibrant. We don't want them to pop forwards. That's the biggest thing. So again, there's between here we've got a similar thing. So I'm just going to go in with this middle. You see how dry that, how that's dried quickly. So I would say at this point, if you've got some fresh water, because you don't want to be getting new really dark shadowy water in with some of these nice fresh colours. So just make sure you've got a spare water, that you can it's not going to like dull your lovely work that you've done already. So again, I'm just going to pick out any of these colours, some of these at between. So where was I looking? Let's see where I was now. Oh, there was some up here, wasn't there? So again, tiny bit of white tint in there. Not too much, so I want it to be quite dull, but I do want it to be different to that. So I've got a couple of, we know it creates that sense that there is a pebble in there without doing an awful lot to it, which is what we want. Because I might lighten it slightly. If you lighten it, you know, not too much to start with, it helps. You can always make it a bit lighter. So I know, again, I know there's a stone there. There's something else here. I'm going to pop that just a little mark there. So I'm just working my way along. And again, here, there's something a bit lighter there. It's almost a bit browny. So I'm just going to go in, bit of a tint. Again, there's almost a little light section on there. So we're just adding very small amounts, but it's enough to make us think, yeah, there's a rock under there, without totally changing it. I think everything else, apart from these lighter ones here, which I'll go in with a different colour once I start to mix some other colours similar. So there's something here between, but again, they're pinky, so I'm going to need to get some reds and purplies and things to mix these ones up. So I'm happy just popping those few little bits in so far. I might just lighten this ever so slightly over here because there's almost a bit of a shine. That probably helps with the, you know, the getting the sense of the wet pebbles as well on the beach. So we'll get that on just a little bit there. Yeah, so there we go. So what I'm going to be doing now is starting to look at these underlayers. So all we're doing really is looking at the tone. So we want to look at the shadow side of each of these things, and we want to look at like a mid-tone as well and try and get them on while they're wet. So I'm going in, so quite a few of these colours I think are a bit of a, almost a peachy red, aren't they? Peachy orangey. So I'm going to go in with this one, which is, I suppose it's a red, but it's a Acadian red. It's a slightly warmer one. If you don't have Acadian red, it doesn't matter. You can go with a normal red. Go in also, if you've got a warmish yellow, I'm going to go in with this one. It's probably Acadian yellow. It's slightly on the warmer edge, but it doesn't have to be. Just go with what you've got. And then I'm going to go in with a tint as well. So those are the colours I want to look for these, but I still want to get in some of these undertones here. So I'm looking here, still going to use, still some fairly pinky, but they're still a bit muted because of the fact of where they are underneath. So I'm just going to mix in a bit of this red and a bit of white, which will give us that pinky tone. But I also want to go in with a bit of purple because it's that's what it feels like. I'm going to test it as well, just to see if it's giving me okay. So I'm a bit happy with that, but I think I'm going to still put a bit more reddy colour in that. We're getting there slowly. Just warming that pink up a bit. But I'm also going to take the warmth out of it with some of the white, make it more pastel-y. So here I've got these swirls. Okay, I'm happy with these swirly bits here. So that's I'm going to make this a bit damp, very not really, make it thick enough so that you could get it to cover, but damp enough so it'll go on. And then I'm also looking at these blues, so I'm going to go back in with my blue and a white to make it a bit more dull. And I'm also going to go in with a bit of that bit of purple as well. And I'm also going to go in with a bit of brown. And the reason I'm going in with brown is because that takes any warmth out of that stone entirely and makes it much more. So I'm kind of got this bluey tone in here. I've got a tiny bit more brown in it. So we're just looking at how we can take the warmth out of, because a lot of stones don't have much warmth in them, unless like the top ones do. So there we go. So I'm going to try and pop these on, but I've mixed them both up at the same time so that I can actually get them to blend in. So I'm just really going to, whatever I can see, whatever swirly pattern I can see, I'm just going to try and recreate basically without going into the really shadowy area, because we've already done that. However, the edge of this stone, this is what I was saying, has got much darker here. So what I'm going to do is just take out even more bit of brown into that blue and just pop that on the edge. And whilst it's still damp, it comes all the way down there, doesn't it, on the edge? I'm just going to start to still get the other colours in, the blues and the hues. I'm just going to change brushes because that always happened to me on that one. So I'm still getting these interesting colours in here, blues. And then I'm going to go in with these, and this will look really odd. I'm just going to warn you in advance. So I'm blending it a bit. I'm just moving those colours because when you get this marble effect, they do kind of go into each other, don't they? It's not going to end up with a massive muddy mess because you've got two colours that are on the blue tone spectrum, so it's not like you're trying to put a yellow in there. Just pop that in, and again I'm looking here, it's feeling much darker still, but I'm going to go in again with a bit more brown in there, into that blue that I've already got, and into the other colour. Let's see what that feels like now. So because I'm blending it whilst it's still damp, you won't get that really hard, harsh edge. It just kind of transitions quite nicely. You know, you can pop some of the other colours over the top and around. You know, this edge here that you've got, you can soften over if you want to soften that like edge like that. We can soften the edge of the shadow if we want to. So we're just, you know, really manipulating the paint really to get the similar effect. So this one too. So this is even more kind of bluey grey underneath there, isn't it? Which I've tried to create. But again, just go in much more blue over here. Just going in with the edge of this stone even here. It's quite linear, isn't it? We're getting those linear lines. And we're just creating, you know, what we can see. And again, we've got these darker, we have got this darker shadow coming over the top there. So again, you know, you can extend that if you want to. That feels better. So we just, yeah, so those aren't going to jump up at us, but it's giving us enough so that when we then go on the top ones, we can do it. So even here, look, there's this kind of reddy pinky one. So I'm going to go in and do that. And again, it's just thinking, what colours do I use? How can I create that colour? Well, that's gone really too dark. So I'm going to come away from that. That'll be good somewhere else. Make sure your brushes are really nice and clean between doing the different tones. So I'm going to go in with a bit more red. I'm even going to go in with a bit of white. I think you could put some ochre or something in there, or a bit of yellow. Might be too light like that. So I'm going to go in with a bit of, go with ochre or even a bit of brown again, because remember these are still on the bottom layer. Well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to go in with a browny colour here. And again, because it's a dark brown, it's just taking out, it just takes out the colour. It knocks down the colour a little bit and saves it for these ones that are on the top. And again, I'm just looking where I get a bit of a shadowy side of it. I'm blending that in as I go. And then there might be other like little markings and things, and you can, you know, be free to put those on. So every stone we do is like that. Now, obviously the ones at the bottom don't have many light patches. This has a tiny bit, but not much. So I'm just going to go in and with a bit of pinky colour and just pop that on. It's really the ones on the top that start to, will finish up with a light version. So as long as you can get your shadowy blends in, so I'll demonstrate on with this pinky one here. So I'm going to go in with Acadian red here. These two are slightly different tones anyway. I'm going to go in with a bit of yellow. I'll show you what I'm mixing up. I'm going to go in, I want to knock this down with a white tint. Now you could also knock this down with something like Naples yellow if you have that as well. Now it's, yeah, see this is a little bit warmer down here. So although I'm going to test that out, make sure, okay, I'm fairly happy with that for that stone actually. But what I want to do, make sure, so I'm going to bring this in, make sure it's damp enough. I want to make sure I've got this, which is a little bit bluey purple. So I'm going to go in with that little bit of bluey purple. Oh, it's dried. I'm going to go in with a bit of purple. And at the side, just mix up something that I'm going to put the shadow in with. I'm not making it like really intense because it's nothing like as dark as this. But even the purple has got blue tone to it. Or you could use blue, you could try that. I'm going to just go in, try a bit of blue in there. So I feel like I've got enough there and it's all damp to be able to get that shadow side in. So I'm going to go in with this on the top. Now there's lots of other colours in there, I can see that, but I'm just going to get a base colour on to start with. And again, this is where you can use the edge of your brush if you've got any ends that you want it to be a bit neater. Go in like that and just pull them round with your brush, let your brush kind of really flatten out on the page. And it'll create that shape as you go around. To get all of those in. I think my paint's actually a little bit too thin on here, but never mind. Bring it round. Still going to paint in there. But then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go in and get this, you know, the bottom here. So this is why I want to blend while it's still a bit damp, so that I'm getting this underside. It might not be quite dark enough, so I'm going to go back in again. Maybe bring a bit of blue in there. Still got a bit of white in it, so it's not like the darkest. I'm going to go back over that a little bit. Still getting in some of these shadowy areas, but you see what you know. You see what I mean? It's just that we're blending it, so it's not really hard. It kind of like makes it much softer, as though you're blending a sky or something. Really, we still know that this is the base, but it's not. It gets that soft edge that pebbles have. And there's a couple of other little marks on there. You know, you can go in with the similar colours where you get any kind of stone. So it's quite smooth, this pebble, isn't it? We've got a few little lines. So, and this is where the texture comes in. So if there's anything that you see, you think, oh, I really want to get that in, then by all means get that in. And you can take it out as well if you're not that, you know, if you think, oh, it's just too much, put too much in, take it out whilst it's wet. Okay, so that's one bit. Now the other bit is obviously you've got all the markings on there. You might have some areas that are just slightly darker. Well, you can just add a little bit more colour into one of the sections while it's still damp again. Gives you a lot more control over it. So I'm just going to add some of those other colours that I can see. And then same again, I'm just going to go in. So the final thing, if you've got all of your other layers, I can see there's a bit more yellowy, so I'm going to go in with a slight bit more yellowy. And this is what I said, you know, you can spend a long time doing all these bits and bats. So just focusing on having a go without like the worry of having to finish it really today. I'm going to pop some bits in here that are a bit more yellowy because that's what I can see. Or even a bit of pastel-y, you know, make them a bit more. You've got some areas you think they're a little bit lighter, and make a watery mix-up that you can still blend. And then we start to think about each of these stones. Then we really need to think about the light on them here. And just have a look, because sometimes you get a bit that's more watery, and sometimes it's really quite bright white. So we're just trying to create that shape. So I'm going to go in with a bit of white tint, with a tiny bit of pink in it, but I'm going to make it a bit more watery, so it's a bit thinner, because we can do that with acrylics. And I'm just going to still create the shape I can see, make it nice and watery, because not all of it's really bright white. And this is how we get the difference with it. So I'll get that in. There's interesting shapes as well going on here that you can start to see. And then, so you started to get this watery effect, but then you're going in now with those really clear, much lighter patches of white in there. So pick out some where your brights are going, where your real clear patches of white are going, because where it really catches the light on the pebble. And pop those in. Now it won't be noticeable with just one pebble, but as you start to get a group of them and you start to do the same thing to each one, that's when it starts to make a difference. So you know, don't expect a transformation with just one of the pebbles, but as you get the other ones in, that's when you can really start, you know, things will really start to show. Now, obviously, with that as well, you've obviously got the markings of these stones. There's one here that's actually got white in it. Now, it's a bit more pastel-y, perhaps. So I'm going to pop a tiny bit of white in it, but, you know, those are very definite marks on those stones. So I would literally, if that's, you know, whatever definite mark you've got, pop that in. Although it's a bit broken up, often they are, aren't they? So, you know, don't be frightened of getting the shapes of those in as well. So that's it really for every single pebble. That's what we're going to do, you know, is to look at getting that nice blend of the edge, so it just feels like, doesn't feel like so that's it softly goes over the edge, get those soft edges with it. And then obviously, you know, a bit of wateriness on it with the smooth ones. Now with the textured ones, we can really start to put some texture in. I'll put a bit more in this one. So I'll just keep going, demonstrating a few more of these, and you keep going, doing what you're doing. But I'm going to make this one a little bit more, it's got a bit more orangey in it. So that's what I'm going to do, make it a bit more orangey with a tint. So I'm just adding a bit more yellow, really. Do keep testing, it's really helpful. That's too thin at the minute for me, so I need to add much more paint to that. And that will help with the opaqueness. If we make it too thin like watercolour, it won't be as opaque. So plenty of paint in. Can get to the point where it's too pastelised. You need to almost put colour back into that. That's that. Okay, we're getting there a bit more now. We want to add a bit more red. So again, when I'm happy with the colour, I want to just get some of the shadow made up. Decide what colour that shadow will be. So it's this down here. So again, it's a kind of bit purpley blue again, isn't it? So everything's drying so quickly. So I'm just going to mix up another. That's too warm. So I'm going to go in, bring some brown in. Brown is a great colour. Bring that down. Let's press that next to it. Okay, yeah, not happy with that. Might need to add a bit more, but we'll see. And we're just doing it very subtly. So I'm going to go in with the main colour, and again we can adapt the main colours as we go. We'll see mine, as I said about this line here, drawing the line too much, it has that bend. I'm just going to get all of this shape in, keep it moving. Carefully does it, just pull the brushes round, brush bristles round. A bit of stuff in there. So yeah, so just pull it round, keep pulling around the colours. So mine's obviously a little bit patchy at the moment. I might add a little bit more depth to it. That's where I can see it's a bit brighter in there. Because there is different tones as well when we're looking at these stones. So this is obviously still wet, which is good, because I want to get in there these darker, slightly darker colours. So you can see a few brighter colours as well. So if it's a bit more, say, reddy in places, just pop that in while it's still damp, because again, we can just blend it a little bit. And the section that goes all the way around there before we get that shadow, which is a little bit darker as well. So I'm going to add a bit of, and it's all still blendable. It's kind of smooth, but with a bit of texture, isn't it, really? So again, we've got some that side, so I'm going to pop in some darker bits in there. It's still blendable. So here's where then you want to start looking at this bit of edge here. This is where I go in with this darker colour. Make it blended in a little bit. It's not everywhere, it's just sections of the stone. And start to look at where it starts. Blend it around. And if you'll see at the top as well, so underneath the stone, there's a bit more shadow under there coming round. But it's not really dark, is it? It's just kind of more colour, more of this colour that we've been using here. So I'm going to put more of that in. And it's nice and soft on the stone as well, on the pebble. So yes, we're just looking whereabouts does this darker blendiness need to come, and then there'll be other little bits in it. So like there are some flecks and things like that in that stone. So I'm going to get those in. I'll just use a little bit of brown, but you can use what you like. There's some little natural flecks in there, and there's also some lighter ones as well. Oops. Just going to blend that a bit more. Not a bit too dark. Let's take some paint off. This is the beauty of keeping it all damp, really, as you can. So it's more, I'd say, there's more of a shape over this side that's a bit more of an angle. So then, you know, we're starting to look at actually this same kind of area as before. I would go in with those white spots a little bit later, but what I am going to do is I'm going to go in with this very kind of wishy-washy one again. So a bit of white, wash it down a bit, a bit thinner, and then actually it's almost a little bit mottled because the stone is a little bit mottled. So I'm actually going to pop it on like the stone has got a bit of texture at the top, so you can see that. Start to pop that in, and then create the shapes, because there are some actual little angles and things in here with it. It's not just all mottly, but some of that is. Try and get some of the shapes of the reflections. Come up a little bit too far, perhaps. So. And then anywhere else you can see anything like any little reflections or anything. So it's mainly up this end, isn't it? So then again, we need to go in with the very light bits and create that. So we're creating this lovely 3D effect with these pebbles. So I'm going to go in. There's definitely a highlight here. It's much brighter. Over here. So, you know, you get these highlight spots like we did here on this other one. Not all of it is, but some of it is. Right there. So there we go. So we're getting that. So then all that's left really is to pick out, you know, other the actual true markings of this stone, where you get these ad hoc little white marks and that little white areas on the stone, which we know it's not reflection, it's just, you know, part of the stone, but it still keeps it, you know, looking a little bit damp as well. And then at that point, what you can do is like look between and think, have I got the right, you know, is there enough shadow between there? And if there isn't, just pop it back in. I'm going to do now, just mixing up these darks. I'm going to pop in, want to pop a bit more shadow between there as well. So there's two ways of kneading in it. There we go. So stone by stone, literally, isn't it? You know, and then we go to the next one, etc., etc., and build it up. And I think as you go through, it's like we're starting to see a pattern with these wet mark, you know, these kind of wet areas. But we won't see it until we've got the next and the next and the next, and it will really start to take shape. So I am going to take a pause there and come and see how you're all doing, because it is, you know, and as I said, we may not finish this, well, we probably won't finish it tonight. So it's just looking at how, you know, all the special features that we've got. So just press, take a pause here. So I'm going to call it a day there, actually, and that just kind of shows sometimes we don't get quite on as far because we're really looking at the content side of it. But if I do get to finish it, I shall pop it on for you to see. And I hope you enjoyed kind of looking at how we build it up so far. It is a great one to do. All right, thank you. Bye.